Test. Works fine. Perfect. So I usually don't sound like this, but this is a good day for my radio voice. So thank you very much for inviting me to be with you today, both those here in the room at the Michener site, as well as those of you who are online. Just so you're in the right place, or you think you're in the right place, this is the open forum to discuss the research strategic plan after your very successful launch last week. And first and foremost, congratulations to all of the research community for realizing such an impressive strategic plan. It's also nice, in a few minutes, Brad's going to be in the hot seat. I'm usually used to that, so it's a great day for me to see Brad taking all of your questions. So I hope you're thinking those up. I also think as we all had a look at the priorities that you've stated for this strategic plan, they're incredibly impressive. They also align very nicely with the broader strategic plan of UHN. Your theme of "we're in it together" certainly aligns nicely with the theme of a healthier world. I also know that the work that you've been doing has been nicely complemented by and frankly aligns wonderfully with the work that's being done by your colleagues in education, and that in the not-so-distant future, the educational strategic plan will be revealed, and I think it does very much complement and work in a dovetailed approach, as it should, with research. As you know, in the UHN strategic plan, we talk about convergence and catalyzation of new knowledge for maximum skill and impact, and the in it together theme, as well as the contents of this strategic plan, certainly demonstrate to me and the senior team and the board that those things are not only aligning, but you'll work hard to bring them together for tangible results and maximum impact. So our collective goal clearly is to create environments that will accelerate the translation of your remarkable research into new knowledge, into clinical practice, and into, in some cases, commercialization, another major theme of the broader UHN strategic plan. We know none of those are easy things to do, but no better team than yours to make those things happen. Sadly, the research literature indicates a lag period between 17 and 7 years from research findings to standardization in clinical practice. Those numbers are daunting at best, and I think this strategic plan speaks boldly to trying to narrow that gap, particularly of our own research, taking our own research and bringing it into clinical practice at UHN is something that's ambitious and bold, and that we truly are in it together over. I know all of you are passionate about scholarship and passionate about clinical care, as I am, and all of you as scientists and those who support scientists are inquisitive in nature. I know that there are times when strategic plans seem the antithesis of scientific inquiry, but I want to also persuade you, I might have once held that view personally. But in my experience, I've seen that sometimes these big, bold steps and putting a stake in the ground about where we wish to be and what we need to do and how we might do that actually can greatly advance an organization. So I know you have a Slido session coming up, and again, I don't want to stand between you and the questions, which are most important. I know you also want to hear from Brad, but before I close, I want to express my appreciation to Brad in the role that he's played, not only in this, but in leading the research and science enterprise at UHN. In my now 10 months here, he's been a great partner in ensuring that we never have any discussions at UHN that don't include the importance of our research and science mission, and that we consider carefully with all decisions, not only the incredibly important mission in clinical care, but equally the mission in science and discovery. So thank you for inviting me. Brad, over to you.
Thanks, Kevin. I really appreciate those remarks, and I also am very excited today to be able to discuss with you our new strategic plan for research. And this is your strategic plan. It represents the synthesis of input from over 300 people across the research enterprise, across UHN, our patient partners. And I particularly want to thank the core working group. There are 15 individuals or so. They're at the back of the strategic plan, who spent a whole lot of time working with me and our team to put the plan together. And this plan addresses or starts off in the context of who we are. And it starts in the context of already what is the largest research hospital in Canada. It's one of the largest research hospitals in North America. We address a number of key chronic disorders that contribute to global health and years of life lost. The global burden of disease ranks these 7 major chronic disorders that are listed here that are key parts of the research that we do as accounting for 75% of all life years lost to disease. And this research occurs across 6 dedicated research institutes across all of our 4 hospitals. And we constitute now close to 1 million square feet of dedicated research space and an annual research budget of almost $400 million. So it's very high in terms of absolute size, but particularly in terms of research intensity. If you look at the overall global budget of UHN, research constitutes about 20% of our total activity, with nearly 4,000 individuals across research, across UHN that are involved in research. We also start in the context of the articulation of the vision for UHN, the strategic plan which has just been released, and that vision being a healthier world, capturing the global impact that UHN strives to have, and also capturing within it the importance of research. And that vision was created after the definition of our purpose and values for UHN. And our purpose statement, the reason that UHN exists, includes this statement that we are here to transform lives not only through excellence in care, but also through discovery and learning. It's an essential component of what we are and why we exist. And the values and the needs of the patients coming first as the primary value was also very informative to many of the discussions we have in terms of the purpose of the research mission here itself. It ultimately addresses these needs of patients, and particularly the unmet needs of patients today. The patients that come in with pancreatic cancer, where we don't have options for these patients that we would like to have today, and many other of these diseases across those chronic conditions. And so the mission that we've articulated is presented in the strategic plan, and it's together we drive excellence in discovery and innovation to create a healthier world. The research is that engine towards that vision for UHN. And we also articulate 4 other additional values apart from those that have been articulated at the UHN level. And these are curiosity, asking questions, seeking answers, creativity, courage, and collaboration. And these are values that will guide the decisions we make, that guide the decisions around recruitment, around promotion, around decisions around resources. They're key parts of what we value as an institution. And we've also set our goals for research impact. And there are 3 primary areas here. The first is to advance fundamental understanding of health and disease. And we're a hospital, but we're a research hospital, and we also have a fundamental commitment to the basic science, to translational science, to clinical application, to advance our knowledge of disease and of biology. We also have a commitment or a goal to accelerate this discovery and advancements that we make in research to have clinical impact, to address these unmet needs of patients. And the statement that you just heard from Kevin around the lag between discovery and impact, part of why we exist and how we want to measure ourselves is how fast we can translate that to have impact for patients. And then finally, we're also a major contributor to training and developing tomorrow's research leaders. One of the biggest impacts that we have, and the impacts that all of you have when you raise funds on grants and train graduate students and research fellows and clinical fellows, is the creation of this workforce that goes on to contribute to science in a global way. We've also articulated our goals for organizational excellence. These are the goals that we want to measure ourselves by. These are going to be our indicators for the future to assess how we're doing in terms of having impact. We want our research institutes and our research programs to be recognized amongst the world's best and to be measured against the world's best. We're home to where discoveries that change the world. We want to create a diverse and collaborative and empowering environment that enables science to move forward and to attract top research talent. We want UHN to be the place where patients want to go to participate in and benefit from cutting-edge research, that we're known in the community as a research hospital and where one will benefit from cutting-edge research discoveries. We want UHN to be a preferred partner for our other healthcare organizations, but also for governments, for leaders in industry, and across the science and technology ecosystem. And then finally, we also want to be a strong and financially sustainable organization, one that can attract funding in a very competitive way from all sources, from industry, from government, but also which delivers on that funding, delivers impact, and attracts funding from philanthropy and other sources because we're recognized to be an organization that creates impact from those investments. So that's the context and the goals of our strategic plan. You've seen a copy of it here. And what the teams have done is to articulate 5 areas, 5 priority areas to move us towards those goals and those impacts. And these 5 are listed here. The first is to engage every patient that comes to UHN to be part of the research ecosystem, part of our learning healthcare system. We want to empower our research teams and collaboration across those teams, across that diversity of UHN. We want to accelerate the translation of discovery to practice and all the pieces and components that are necessary to move quickly and to move more rapidly. Just like the UHN plan, we have a priority to unleash the power of technology and innovation. And then finally, we want to continue to grow research through the creation and optimization of financially sustainable structures. So I just want to spend a couple of minutes to go through each of these priorities and tell you a little bit about some of the ideas behind them. So the first of these is around engaging every patient. And this is to increase our capacity to learn from our patients. The best teachers that we have around the needs for research, the impact for research, come from the patients that are here at UHN. And one of the goals is to have every single patient who comes to UHN part of the research enterprise, part of a consent process to capture data, to capture material, to make every patient to have the option to participate in research studies, biological data and clinical data. The second is to empower research teams and collaborations, and one of the things that we heard a lot from the community is the synergy that can happen when we bring together teams that include fundamental scientists, translational scientists, clinical researchers, frontline research, or frontline clinical teams as part of a continuum that connects fundamental basic discovery to clinical application. We also heard that there's opportunity that we don't take good enough advantage of currently at UHN. The fact that we have a terrific cancer center and a cardiac center and a neuroscience center and a rehab center all across UHN, something that is quite unique to us as an organization, and the opportunities that exist to collaborate across those dimensions and across those fields. And so we're going to be building environments that facilitate the collaboration both within those vertical pillars as well as across those horizontal teams. We want to accelerate translation of discovery to practice. This includes having streamlined applications, support services for grants, for ethics review, for contracts, for legal, all those support systems that need to be in place. We want to optimize opportunities to translate through commercialization. And we also want to be a receptor for our own discoveries so that the clinical trials that we do, the discoveries that we make, UHN can be an early adopter back in to demonstrate clinical impact. We want to unleash the power of technology and innovation. This includes the establishment of digital platforms that enable widespread data collection across patients, but also the analytical tools in order to capture information and glean new insights from it. We want to build capabilities in artificial intelligence, machine learning, and data science, areas that we've begun to make investments in already. and also to develop the structures that to invent and to incorporate these new technologies sooner into clinical practice. And then finally, we want to grow research through financially sustainable structures. And this includes efforts to increase external funding from government sources, from charity sources, from industry, from becoming a better partner with industry. We want to work increasingly more closely with our foundations that are essential components of the research enterprise, to align our strategy and to ensure that we raise funds and build campaigns for the highest priorities of research. And we want to continue to invest in our institutes, in core facilities, in technology platforms, in support services, to create an environment that is extremely supportive for scientists and clinicians across the entire organization. So this creates a potential model that we would like to have in place by the end of our strategic plan. This is a model that highlights our perceived areas of expertise and differentiation from other institutes, as well as all the enabling characteristics that need to put that in place. So in terms of the sort of distinguishing aspects that we want to be known for and to strengthen, this includes the creation of these collaborative teams of research across that full continuum of research, the continued work to bring integration of research, care, and education, something that UHN is already well known for, but where there are certainly more room to improve, this acceleration of learning, discovery, and impact, and our role as leaders, both locally, nationally, and globally, in the research and clinical realms. And to enable this, we need to build the high-performing people and culture. We need leading-edge infrastructure and technologies and cores and support services, strong external partnerships with those in our immediate environment, the University of Toronto in particular, but also our collaborative organizations that cluster around the Discovery District in downtown Toronto. And then also the creation of effective governance and financial sustainability structures within and across UHN. And of course, as Kevin said, we've been very much guided by the UHN strategic plan. Each of these priorities touches on one or more of the UHN priorities. And as we move into an implementation phase of the strategic plan, we'll be working very closely with the UHN teams to ensure that our research priorities are deeply embedded and part of the larger UHN priorities across the organization. So in terms of what's next, what we're going to be doing is around each of those 5 priorities is that we're going to be creating a series of initiatives, concrete initiatives, 1 to 3 initiatives that will have a timeline for integration. Some of these will be more rapid. Some of these will be more short-term or longer-term. We're going to assemble teams around each of the priorities with a chair and a co-chair and invite many of individuals across the organization to be part of that. They're going to articulate and define each of these priorities in concrete detail and also define our measures of success and be responsible for the implementation and tracking of those new initiatives. And by January of next year, this process will be well into place across each of those 5 priorities. And this is all in the documents. There's website addresses for both the UHN plan as well as the research strategic plan. Okay, so that's it for my presentation. What I'm really here today to do is to listen to you and to address questions. I know we've got a lot of people online who are submitting questions through Slido, but please, if you're in here too, we've got microphones so you can raise your hand, and I'm glad to address anything or any part of the plan or hear any other comments or feedback that you've got here today.
Hi, everyone. We are now going to begin our question and answer period of this town hall. My name is Helen Chan. I'm the Director of Research Strategy and Development, and I'm going to be your moderator today. So the audience, as Brad said, can ask questions directly. We have 2 microphones, Carrie and John on either side. So just raise your hand and the microphone will come to you. Please speak directly into the microphone so those of you who are watching through live stream can hear very clearly. Also, you can ask questions through Slido if you're a little shy. And you just go to www.slido.com and enter the event code #UHNSRP. So we're going to alternate questions between the floor and Slido, and we're going to try to get through as many as we can in this short period. So let's start. Anyone from the floor?
Hello, everyone. My name is Kevin Kuo from Toronto General Hospital. Good afternoon, Brad. My question is, how do we engage the clinical teams? From multiple people I've heard, and I've also experienced myself, that the clinical team feels that research teams and any sort of research appointments are more of a burden than an asset to the organization. I mean, you go from room fighting all the way to, snatching, labs and so forth, and kits and that sort of thing, or to rooms. It's, I mean, we're all in this family together, and I just wish that, I can help in some way to build a more harmonious relationship with the clinical team.
Yeah, so I think, we heard a lot around this potential of engagement of clinical and research teams together and education. And I've seen, across UHN, pockets where you do have this deep engagement. You've got teams of clinician scientists, translational scientists, and basic scientists working together. And what I've seen where this works is when those groups are working around a shared vision of what they're trying to achieve. And I often say to, when we're looking at our basic scientists, PhD level scientists, why does someone working in structural biology or basic immunology want to come work in a hospital? Why do they want to be at UHN? And the reason that they want to be here is because of that clinical opportunity, both the opportunity to see their discoveries translated, but probably even more so to be guided by the patients and clinicians themselves in terms of what are those big opportunities and what are those big unmet needs. And it changes the research that gets done, and it also can accelerate the research that happens. So, this is a very powerful opportunity. It's the kind of synergy that we absolutely want to create. But it is heterogeneous at the moment. You see it working very well in specific areas, and other areas not so much. And part of that is around building those teams that will come together around recruitment, so that we're recruiting clinician scientists in areas where we have basic strength, or vice versa, that we're recruiting basic scientists in areas where we have very strong clinical expertise or clinical opportunities. And it's one of the those key priorities around empowering scientists or empowering research teams is going to be addressing this particular question: is how can we put in together some incentive structures to bring those teams together? And part of that is around funding, is around building campaigns, is articulating visions around what's trying to be achieved. And what we haven't done in the plan is to be prescriptive, around areas of cardiology or areas around mental health. But what our expectations are is that the research institutes, the clinical programs will be coming together, to articulate those areas of strength and to be guided by this larger strategic vision.
Okay, let's go to a question from Slido. Given that one of the strategies is to increase external funding from government and industry sources, what internal mechanisms will be in place to ensure that high-volume departments will be able to handle even more? For example, contracts, RFS, and grants.
Yeah, so let me say two things here. So it's a very important question, and it's something that I hear a lot of, is around the services that we provide, the timeliness of grants, contracts, and so on. And part of this is due to, a part of addressing this is around building our research enterprise in a manner that is structurally sustainable and can grow. As we grow external funding, we need to grow those support services with them. And the funding for both of those two parts come through different mechanisms. Most of our external funding doesn't actually bring in funding to support those support services, and we need to build ways to do that alongside of that. And so we've actually been doing a lot of work over the last year, working with the foundations, working with our colleagues and the research institutes to create financial structures and financial models that will ensure that we can grow external funding and operating dollars on principal investigator supported research projects alongside growing the costs for all of those support services. And we've come quite a long way over the last year in building that kind of sustainability model. We're working to do that both internally at UHN with each of our foundations and with the models that we did, how we do that. You saw we introduced this 5% support fee last year. This was in part to address this. But we're also working with our colleagues across Toronto, then the Tasman hospitals, to create a common structure for this, and at the University of Toronto. And we're working at the federal and provincial levels as well as to try and increase the support for those kinds of costs associated with research. The second part, is really around how to build an efficient system to do this and an engaged system. And again, just like all things at UHN, there are areas where I see this working really well, and areas where we still have lots of improvement to do. And it's even different at different departments and different sites. And where it works well is where those support teams are deeply engaged in the research mission and research questions themselves, where they're embedded as part of research teams, and where those teams feel the reward from science and from research in terms of impact in the same way that all of the rest of you do. And so that's kind of the model that we're implementing, is this sort of embedded model where those teams, the contract reviewers, REB teams, the coordinators, the legal teams, HR, and so on, feel part of those larger research groups and research teams. It's an area that we have a lot of bold performance targets to hit over the next year in contracts, and it's one that we hear a lot about in particular, which is kind of rate limiting now for the activation of clinical studies. We've set some clear goals. It's going to be our key performance indicator that's going into the UHN scorecard is going to be that measure. And so we're placing a firm stake in the ground as to what we want to achieve there, and are going to be extremely transparent about the performance and how that goes forward.
Okay, let's take another one from the audience. Any questions? Okay, back to Slido. So definitely bold and visionary goals, which the research community is excited about. How will they be evaluated, and how will progress be evaluated and measured in achieving these priorities?
So it's a good question, and I've become kind of a convert to key performance indicators. This is something that a lot of the hospital has, and these are indicators that are designed around the impact that you're trying to have. And so over the last year, we've been creating these indicators across our operations teams. Each of the RSS departments has a key set of indicators. These are the goals of which they're trying to achieve, and they're the things that we're going to measure and report on a regular basis. We're going to do the same thing around the strategic plan. Those initial areas, those 5 areas of excellence that I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation, these are the areas that we're going to build our performance indicators around. And one of the things that we'll be doing as part of the implementation plan of this strategic plan is to bring a group across UHN together to articulate specifically the indicators of performance that we want to evaluate ourselves on. This could be indications around publications, around application of science into clinical practice, around benchmarking to others, and so on. But we want to articulate what those are, and we want to measure and report on them. This is also true for funding and so on. And each of our 5 strategic priorities is going to, alongside building those initiatives, are also going to build alongside them the indicators that we've been successful, or to what degree we've been successful. And what I've told all of our teams is that, building these indicators, we want to have 3 key aspects in mind. The first is that we want these indicators to be as meaningful as possible to the stakeholders. And so one of these, these indicators is the time it takes to activate a clinical trial. And whether that's due to contracts or REB or other issues, the real meaningful indicator there is how long did it take to put my first patient on a trial. We want the indicators to be measurable, qualitative indicators or assessments that you do once a quarter, that are not objective or not based on hard data, are also not that useful. So we want these to be almost robotically determined. We want this data to be created and fed to our leaders and our teams across the organization so that they can act on that data and implement changes beyond that data. And then third, to the extent possible, we'd also like all of these indicators to be benchmarked or comparable to other institutes. So you can ask the questions, how are we doing, relative to our competitors or to the other organizations that we want to be considered alongside?
Okay, question from the floor.
Hi. You mentioned themes. I'm not sure if that's exactly what you called them, but you'd have a project lead and then kind of a co-project lead. What's the point of these? What are they, and what's their overall point in kind of the grand scheme of things?
Yeah. So what each of these are going to do is to articulate specifically the initiatives inside each of those priorities. So these are concrete changes that we want to implement over the next year, over the next 2 years. So just to give you an example of one of them kind of which is already started, is an effort that we're going to have essentially to consent every patient who comes to UHN. And what we've been talking about there, which is something that a couple of other hospitals have done now, is to create an opt-out consent. This is a consent where essentially all patients would have to opt out or would otherwise be considered to have consented to be contacted for the future participation in research. And what that means is it would be a fundamental change at UHN. Right now, only people who are part of the circle of care can consent patients. This would make all patients consented. It's a model that actually sort of has started here already at Toronto Rehab. Toronto Rehab have a centralized recruiting consenting mechanism so that all patients are asked to participate or to be able to be contacted for future research. And then a secondary initiative that would follow from that would be around an opt-in consent, so asking each patient to allow us to capture and use their data for research purposes, or to capture and use tissue that comes from each of those patients for research purposes, to make that globally available to the community. So that's one example from one of those, but it's really around creating some concrete, real changes around each of those priorities in a meaningful way. And we're working with all the other leaders across the programs and research institutes to identify individuals who to be part of that. But anyone who's interested is welcome to reach out who wants to be part of any of those priorities.
Okay, let's take another one from the floor.
Hello, Brad. My name is Elias Uruji from Epigenomics Initiative. My question is, what are the strategies to reach out to international organizations or consortiums, for instance, like in cancer, TCGAs, things like that?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that is done internally inside the research institutes and the research programs. The UHN and each of its individual research institutes often play kind of key roles, leadership roles at both local and international levels. We did hear, in some of the discussions around the need to continue to strengthen that leadership and to grow that research leadership. And I think it's, from a kind of a strategy point of view, it's important to have individuals that want to have that role or want to participate and play in those roles. It's important to have individuals that are key contributors locally, but it's also have individuals that are big contributors internationally. So, our partnerships, we regard that as key, both internationally, but also in Toronto as a hub too.
Okay, let's take one from Slido first. With the budget constraints and micromanaging and now timesheets, many people have said they feel concerned about their job. Will there be job losses in the coming fiscal year?
So, we don't have any job losses that are cuts to research. Research is something that is continuing to grow each year. We're growing at a 5 to 10% level year over year in an environment where healthcare dollars are constrained. Research, exists inside the research hospitals in Toronto and in Ontario and in Canada for a reason. The vast majority of all life sciences research in Ontario and in Canada in general is inside hospitals. And this is unique to Canada, it's unique to Ontario. Other jurisdictions, it's different. And the reason that it's like that in Canada is because our hospitals have been the largest supporters of that research. They have made that research possible. But we are feeling that financial pressure, just like the hospitals are, and the hospital budgets are being squeezed every year. That also has an impact on their ability and the hospital's ability to continue to support research. And part of this is, becomes or is supported by our foundations. And when you look at we have three extremely successful foundations at UHN, Toronto General and Toronto Western Hospital Foundation, the Princess Margaret Foundation, and Toronto Rehab Foundation. And collectively, these three foundations raise in the order of $250 million per year. And it's this philanthropy and the use of this philanthropy to help support research that's actually the bedrock and the cornerstone of why we have a research hospital and a research enterprise inside a hospital. It's our decision to use and to create campaigns across those foundations to support research activities. And this is a decision that the hospital has made historically. It's a decision that our board at UHN supports and understands. And it's also, fundamentally important as to why we have articulated our purpose to include research, learning, and education. It's why UHN exists. Our board acts on that purpose and helps direct that. So there's always more we can do to line up those activities and line up that synergy. We're continuing to work with all those sources of support to continue to grow. But it's why you also see in this strategic plan this focus on financial sustainability and building a model that allows us to be healthy and to continue to grow, to be able to continue to accept external funding, to compete for external funding, whether that comes from other charities, from grants, from governments, or from industry.
Okay, question from the floor.
Hi, Tracy McQuire. First off, I just want to thank you all for such a great plan. I must say, building on what we had already done, I think it's an excellent plan, and I'm really eager to participate. Given that it's the theme of In It Together, how are all of the research teams that are outside of the institutes but are still within the UHN umbrella going to be engaged as part of this entire process?
Yeah, well, one of the things that we've also already started is to increase that engagement. And, late last year, we created an initiative to try to capture all of the scientists and researchers, all the principal investigators that are currently outside of a formal appointment at one of the research institutes. So many of our clinician scientists and clinician investigators participate and contribute to research in a very important way. They have a research appointment, a faculty appointment at the University of Toronto. but didn't have a formalized appointment at the Research Institute. So we're correcting that. We're formally acknowledging and creating research clinician scientist and clinician investigator appointments and to align all of those individuals with one of the research institutes to help promote that alignment. We're going to be doing the same thing across areas of the allied health and also areas like in medical physics and other areas where we've got key contributors and leaders, individual independent leaders in research that are not formally part of those research institutes.
Okay, we'll do a Slido question. If funding is increased, will this be reflected in the compensation of research staff? It's no secret that UHN research pays below other hospitals in Toronto, and Princess Margaret Hospital in particular has lost large numbers of staff in the last year to other institutions that offer higher wages for the same roles.
Well, I mean, that's an important, if that's happening, it's, it shouldn't be happening. I'm a big proponent that compensation is part of what we need to do to create a strong competitive environment, to attract people, to retain people. But it's only a component of that. Obviously, it's an important component. We work with human resources to help build salary structures that are in line with the expectations, and they should be at that level that is commensurate with us being a leading research organization. But I think it's only part of the question. And it's also true for some of our top scientists and top clinicians that compensation and salary will always be areas where there may be bigger opportunities in the US and elsewhere. And I think that the people that we have in those roles here, our superstars and our stars, are in Toronto and are at UHN also for other reasons. And it's because we can create an environment for them to be successful. And I've never met a single scientist or researcher that decided to become and to go into research because of the compensation. We know our lawyers that work in research legal could make more money down on Bay Street. We know our financial analysts could get jobs at the banks and make more money down in the banks. And we know our top scientists could probably go down to some of the institutes in the Northeast and get higher wages too. And we're never going to specifically be able to compete just on that level. Areas in Texas and other places have to, otherwise no one would move there. Toronto is a great international city. People like to be in Toronto. It's an opportunity for us for recruitment. But we want this organization to be one where you have the best possible chance to contribute meaningfully to that larger research mission and vision, and where you have the biggest opportunity to work with other skilled colleagues, with clinicians, with scientists, where you have opportunities for, to benefit from the patients that come through the research enterprise, where we have core resources and technologies unlike that at our competitors, and where you can compete both from a research standpoint, but also compete for funding that is unmatched anywhere else in the world. And that building that environment, compensation is a part of it, but it is only a part of it.
Okay, do we have one from the floor? Okay, let's go to Slido. To implement cutting-edge knowledge in a timely manner, not only researchers will need to think outside of the box, but also the research services, which are currently not always flexible enough to support the unique demands of a particular research. How will you deal with this problem?
I mean, so I agree this is important. The research services teams need to be deeply embedded, as I said, in the research mission and also with the research teams. A place like UHN should be the preferred partner to work with for industry. And this is not only because we've got great scientists and great facilities and excellent resources and clinical samples and so on, but also because we have teams that are very easy to build contracts with, that are can rapidly activate that. And what that means is that we understand our own business very well. Our legal teams need to understand the research business. They need to understand risk better than than anyone else can. And this is something that is going to be is essentially part of creating the culture inside the support services. And I can tell you, I've met lots of individuals who totally get it, and that understand that that's the role, that's why they're here, that's why they want to participate in it. And so we need to break down the barriers where they exist and the bureaucracy and red tape. And I've experienced it myself, and I see others experiencing it. And there are systems that do need improvements like that. And it is something that we're going to be paying a lot of attention to improve as we go forward, just like we do around all the other aspects of ensuring we have great technical facilities, great core facilities, and great collaborators and teams inside the organization.
Anything from the floor? Okay, let's move on. There are some high-profile areas of research that receive a lot of grants and funding. Meanwhile, other research areas struggle to stay operational despite doing great work. How do we balance UHN's research portfolio as a whole while striving for the same organizational strategic priorities?
Yeah, so the reality is that virtually all of our research funding comes externally. The Ministry of Health, ensures that we don't spend any of their money on research. In fact, we're not allowed to. We have to be financially very responsible and careful to demonstrate that we haven't. So every dollar that supports research activity here comes from somewhere else. It comes from external grants, or it comes from relationships with industry, or it comes from philanthropy. And the levers that we have are around those internal opportunities to raise funds, around philanthropy. And what we've committed to is that we're going to do that and build that around our areas that have the highest chance for impact. And the highest chance for having changing those goals and impact measures that are outlined in the strategic plan. And so we're going to support success, and we're going to support strength, and we're going to support innovation, and we're going to also support areas of where we can seed in opportunities in innovation. And this is the expectation for each of our research institutes and our research programs: is that we do make decisions around building and strengthening programs. But ultimately, we have an expectation that those programs are going to continue to be competitive, that are going to be able to compete for that external funding. And that's a strong measure of success, is that peer review bar that goes through that. A lot of our scientists are supported by chairs and external competitive chairs, Canada Research Chairs. This is an international bar of excellence that makes decisions around science and impact. We want to build the same kind of rigor and structure around our internal chairs and how we award those based on those same principles. And that's why articulating those goals of research excellence as part of the strategic plan is there to help make decisions and to guide decisions going forward.
Anything from the floor? Okay. Will the Toronto General and Toronto Western Foundation and our other foundations, I suppose, be supportive of these research initiatives, or will researchers themselves once again be asked to fund research support services?
So, I can tell you that our research foundations already fund an extremely large component of our research activity. In fact, it's almost about half of our total research activity is funded through philanthropy from our three foundations. Collectively, they fund about $150 million worth of research across UHN. A lot of this is these organizational costs. Our research footprint here, just to operate our facilities, to pay the heat and hot water and the power and the rent where we do that, is upwards around $35 million per year. And these are costs that no one else funds. You know, the CIHR doesn't fund that, and external granting agencies don't fund that, and industry doesn't fund that. It's left up to ways that we can build support for that internally. You know, all of our principal investigator salaries, all of the admin costs, all of those research support services, those organizational costs need to be funded through those internal mechanisms. And the Toronto General Foundation and the Princess Margaret and the Toronto Rehab are the fundamental contributors to supporting that. And I can tell you, without that philanthropy and without that support, we would have no research enterprise here to build around. Part of what we're doing, though, is to increase the structures and support around that. We want to ensure that all of the funds that we bring in can have the highest impact possible. And so we're going to be continuing to work with the foundations to ensure that we raise funds around the areas of highest priority, and in particular the areas that can have the highest potential impact. Just like we have these structures and controls built in for external funding, we want to build in these kinds of controls internally as well.
So I think we have time for one more question. Does anyone have anything from the floor they'd like to ask? And you know, okay, I'm going to go to Slido, but I'm actually going to go to the question just under Andrew about capture. So our capture system is one of the slowest compared to other centers. How can we accelerate translation of research when we're faced with so many barriers when doing translational research or research that uses patient samples? I would argue that the first step is to address these barriers.
Okay, so for those of you who don't know what capture is, this is the approval system to get institutional authorization to conduct research on human samples or with patients. You know, it's a step to ensure all of the regulations are followed to conduct safe clinical trials, and is extremely important from a you know, both an ethical and a reputational framework. Capture was built to enable or to accelerate the process as to how all the authorizations that are required. So it's a parallel process to get REB approval, contract approval, and approval from departments that all have to be part of research. And it's an area that is extremely important to us. What the real question is here is around the activation or authorization of clinical trials, the time it takes to do that. One of those initiatives that inside accelerating translation to clinical practice that we've already begun work on is a quick start program. This is going to be a new program for activation of clinical studies with a guaranteed activation timeline, one that's going to be pretty aggressive in the industry. And what it will mean to be part of a quick start progress will be a series of requirements to have your trial or your study ready for that. But it's one that will enable this a rapid start. So this is going to be one of the initiatives. It's something that we want to be faster at. We want to be seen in industry and with pharmaceutical companies at being a very quick start at. And you know, I guess I can just say stay tuned.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone, for your questions. I'm going to say that we're going to try to answer the rest of the questions that have not been addressed today, and we're going to post them so that you can have a look at them. And I'm just going to leave it to Brad now to close up.
Yeah, so I just want to say thanks, and you know, this is just the beginning. We're going to be sharing with you these initiatives across the priorities. We want to have your input on those, and most of all, we want to have create impact from this strategy over the coming years. Thank you.